Her kids can eat when they get home. The words just hung there in the air, sharp as a steak knife. I froze. The waiter, who was in the middle of pouring me a glass of water, even paused. We were at one of those new, fancy restaurants in Naperville. La Sirena, I think it was called. It was Sheila's choice, of course. My son Dennis's wife always picked the places with cloth napkins that felt like hand towels and menus so big you could hide behind them. I was just happy to be seeing my family. Dennis and Sheila sat on one side of the big, round booth with their two little ones. On my side, I'd squeezed in with my other two grandchildren, Ethan and Lily. They're my daughter Sandra's kids, 8 and 6 years old. I'd picked them up from soccer practice, and to be honest, they were starving. You know how kids get when their blood sugar drops. They were being perfectly polite, but they were fidgety, their little legs swinging under the table. The waiter, a nice young man, had just asked if he could bring a basket of bread for the table, or maybe get a simple pasta started for the children. Before I could even open my mouth to say, that would be a lifesaver, Sheila cut him off. Her kids can eat when they get home. She didn't even look at the waiter. She didn't look at me. She just flicked her own napkin open, placed it on her lap, and picked up the wine list as if she'd just commented on the weather. I'm 67 years old. I've been through a lot in my life, but I felt a hot, red flush creep right up my neck. I was embarrassed, deeply, truly embarrassed. I glanced over at Ethan. He immediately dropped his eyes and pretended to be fascinated by a spot on the tablecloth. Little Lily just stared at the breadsticks that were already on the table in front of Sheila's children. And that was the part that made my blood run cold. Right across from us, Sheila and Dennis's two children were already happily munching away. Sheila had flagged a busboy down the second we sat and ordered them both fancy pasta with butter and cheese, not even waiting for the rest of us to get water. And as I sat there, that first sting of humiliation started to curdle into something else. That old, familiar ache deep in my stomach. Because this wasn't new. This wasn't a one-time thing. This was just, Sheila, it's been like this for as long as I can remember. Little digs. Small omissions. The kind of cruelty you can't quite put your finger on. The kind that makes you feel crazy if you try to point it out. My daughter, Sandra, is a single mom, and she works harder than anyone I know. Her kids, Ethan and Lily, are good, sweet-natured children. They're polite. They use their manners. But to Sheila, they were less than. They were Sandra's kids, not her kids, not Dennis's kids. I've watched it for years. I'd see it at Christmas, when her children would be ripping open the most expensive, noisy electronic toys, and Ethan and Lily would get a nice pair of socks, or a coloring book. Always something practical, something that quietly said, you are the afterthought. I'd see it at birthday parties, when she'd gush over her own child's messy drawing like it was a Picasso, but give Lily's painting a quick, oh, how nice, before turning away. And my son, Dennis, he just floats right through it. He either doesn't see it or he chooses not to. He's so caught up in his own life, in keeping Sheila happy, that he lets these moments slide by, one after another. But this was different. This wasn't a cheap toy or a half-hearted compliment. This was food. This was two hungry children. I looked at Sheila's condescending smile. She knew exactly what she was doing. She was drawing a line in the sand. These are my children. Those are just relatives. She dismissed my grandchildren's hunger with a flick of her wrist. And I just sat there in that expensive restaurant, watching my grandkids try to shrink and become invisible. My heart just ached. I've spent so many years biting my tongue. I've swallowed my words to keep the peace until I felt sick on them. But as I watched Sheila pick up her wine glass and laugh at something Dennis said, a new feeling started to bubble up from that cold, angry place in my stomach. It wasn't just humiliation this time. It was rage. And I knew, right then, this dinner was about to change everything. The waiter, seeing he'd been overruled, just nodded stiffly and walked away. Dennis, my son, was already tapping on his phone, completely oblivious. And Sheila was studying the wine list like she hadn't just emotionally body-slammed two small children. That was her gift. She could cut you to the bone, and then, without missing a beat, ask the sommelier if the Malbec was oaky. My hands were cold under the table. That rage I felt wasn't new. It was just full, like a glass of water that had been under a slow drip for 10 years, and this was the drop that finally made it spill over. Sheila has always been a lot. She comes from money, and she never, ever lets you forget it. Not in a loud way, you understand. Oh no, that would be tacky. Sheila is all about quiet luxury. Her nails are always perfect, some neutral, expensive-looking color. Her hair is always perfectly effortless, which I know costs her $400 every 6 weeks. She's the kind of person who can look at the sweater you knitted and say, "Oh, how cozy," and make it sound like an insult. When she comes to my house, I suddenly feel like I'm seeing every dust mote on the bookshelf, every little scuff on the baseboards. She just radiates judgment. And Dennis, bless his heart, he just sees her as sophisticated. He thinks she elevated him. But I could handle all of that. I really could. I've learned to live with the subtle digs about my home, or my budget, or my car. What I could never, ever get used to was how she treated the children. My grandchildren. All of my grandchildren. In Sheila's world, there are 2 classes of human beings, her and her biological children, and then everyone else. And my daughter Sandra's kids, Ethan and Lily, were planted firmly in that second-class category. It was a constant, draining performance. She saw them as an extension of my daughter. And Sheila has always, for some reason, been competitive with Sandra. Sandra is a nurse. She's a single mom who works harder than any 2 people I know, and she's naturally beautiful in a way that doesn't require a standing appointment. She's warm and real. Sheila is polished. I've always suspected, deep down, that Sheila resented Sandra for being so content without all the things Sheila needed to feel good about herself. So, she took it out on her kids. Christmas was the worst. It was like a yearly showcase of her favoritism. I remember last year, we were all at Dennis and Sheila's house. Her house. Her 2 kids, of course, had a mountain of gifts that spilled out from under the tree. The new gaming system. The designer brand Ride-On car. Boxes and boxes. And then, Ethan and Lily. I watched Sheila hand them each one perfectly wrapped, medium-sized box. Ethan, who was 8, opened his. It was a 500-piece puzzle of the U.S. states. Lily, who was 6, got a set of markers. Not the big 100-pack, but the basic 12-pack. I saw Ethan's face. He was trying so hard to be grateful. He looked up and said, "Oh, cool. Thank you, Aunt Sheila." But he'd just watched his cousin, who is the same age, open a drone. A drone! And Sheila just smiled that tight, plastic smile and said, "I know you and your mom like practical things." Practical. She made it sound like a virtue, but it felt like a punishment. A punishment for not being her kid. And then there were the birthdays. She never remembered Ethan and Lily's birthdays. Never. But for her own children, my goodness. She'd throw parties that looked like something off of a TV show. Custom-made themes. Professional bakers. A bouncy house that looked more like a castle. A full-page invitation sent in the mail. For Lily's birthday 2 months ago, not even a card. Not a text message. When Dennis and I were on the phone, I gently reminded him. He got quiet for a second and then said, "Oh, I'm sure Sheila just forgot. You know how busy she is." That's the part that really gets you. The excuses. The way everyone just lets it happen. She's busy. She's just like that. She doesn't mean it. Oh, she means it. She means every single bit of it. It's a calculated indifference. It's her way of reminding everyone in the family of the hierarchy. Her children are at the top. Sandra's children are at the bottom. And I'm just the old woman who is supposed to sit quietly and be grateful for whatever scraps of decency she decides to throw. So as I sat there, listening to the clink of silverware on china, that rage inside me just hardened. This wasn't just about a missed bread basket. It was about last Christmas. It was about that forgotten birthday. It was about 100 other small, cold moments that had piled up one on top of the other until they formed a mountain. And here she was in public telling my two sweet, hungry grandkids that they were not even worthy of a piece of bread. She might as well have said, "They don't matter." But they matter to me, and the look on her face, that smug, self-satisfied look, I had enough. I was done being the quiet one. I was done keeping the peace. The peace was a lie anyway. It was just her peace. And I was tired of paying for it. I just sat there, my insides feeling like a tightly wound knot. The waiter eventually returned, his professional smile back in place, and took our orders. Or rather, he took Sheila's. "We'll start with the burrata for the table," she announced, "and the prosciutto board. And she said, pointing to her son, "will have the filet medium. She'll have the lobster risotto." She didn't ask them. She just told the waiter. Then she turned to Dennis, who was back on his phone. "Honey, you're having the duck, right?" "Oh, yeah, sounds great," he mumbled, his thumbs still scrolling. He was in his own little bubble, a perfect two-person bubble with his wife. They were a team. And the rest of us, we were just visiting. Sheila then turned her bright, cold eyes to me. "Jessica, what are you having?" I hadn't even looked at the menu. I felt flustered. "Oh, I'm not that hungry, really. I'll just have the chicken Caesar salad, please." Sheila gave a little laugh. It was a tiny, breathy sound, but it felt like a pinprick. "Oh, Jessica, always so sensible." She turned back to the waiter. "I'll have the sea base. And we'll do a bottle of the Sancerre, the expensive one." Then she looked right at me, her smile all teeth. "You know," she said, leaning in as if sharing a secret, "I've been trying to teach Dennis better budgeting skills. It's just so important to be frugal, isn't it? To know what you can and can't afford." And there it was. It wasn't just about the food. It was about my daughter, Sandra, the single mom. It was about my sensible salad versus her sea base. It was about my practical grandkids versus her filet-worthy children. She was telling me in 1,000 different ways that my side of the family was the budget side, the discount bin. I felt my hands start to shake, just slightly. I clasped them in my lap. I could feel the heat in my face again. I wanted to say something. I wanted to ask her what she meant by that. But I did what I've always done. I gave a tight little nod and looked away. And my eyes landed on Ethan and Lily. They were just sitting there, silent. They hadn't been offered a menu. They hadn't been asked if they wanted a juice or a soda. Their little hands were in their laps, just like mine. And I saw it, really saw it, maybe for the first time. I was teaching them. By staying quiet, by keeping the peace, I was teaching these two beautiful children that this was normal. I was showing them with my own silence that this is how they deserve to be treated. That when someone insults you, you just take it. That when you are hungry, you don't complain. That you are, in fact, less than... I looked at Lily. She was 6. She was pulling at a loose thread on the cuff of her little sweater. Her bottom lip was trembling just a tiny bit. She wasn't looking at Sheila. She was looking at me, and it was like a punch to the gut. She wasn't just looking at me. She was looking to me, waiting for me to fix it, waiting for Grandma to make it right. And I was failing her. All these years, I told myself I was being the better person, the peacemaker, the mature one. I told myself I was protecting my relationship with my son, Dennis. I was making it possible for us to even have family dinners like this. But what peace was I keeping? It was Sheila's peace. It was a peace built on my silence, on my daughter's dignity, on my grandchildren's hunger. It was the peace of the bully, who gets to do whatever they want because no one ever dares to stand up to them. I looked from Lily's trembling lip to Ethan's quiet, ashamed face. He was trying to be a big boy, trying to pretend it didn't bother him, but I could see the hurt in his eyes. And that tight, angry knot inside me didn't just bubble over. It broke. It was a flood. I was done. I was done being sensible. I was done being the peacemaker. I didn't care if I embarrassed my son. I didn't care if I made a scene. My grandchildren were not going to sit there for one more minute learning to be invisible. Tonight felt different because I was different. The woman who walked into this restaurant wasn't the same woman sitting at this table now. I had enough. I stood up. My chair made a quiet, scraping sound on the wooden floor, and it was loud enough to make everyone stop talking. Dennis, my son, finally looked up from his phone, his face a mask of confusion. Mom, everything okay? Sheila didn't look concerned. She looked annoyed. She'd just been about to take a sip of her expensive wine. She put the glass down and sneered. Where are you going? She didn't ask if I was all right. She didn't ask if I needed anything. It was an accusation. I didn't answer her. Not yet. I just opened my purse, took out my wallet, and opened it. That same little brown leather wallet I've had for 15 years. I pulled out a $50 bill and placed it neatly on the table right next to my water glass. More than enough to cover my sensible salad and to pay for the children's place at the table. Then I looked right at her. I looked at her. I didn't let my eyes waver. I let her see for the first time that I wasn't the quiet, invisible woman she'd always treated me as. I wasn't her doormat. She'd been so worried about my budgeting skills all night. I reached back into my wallet. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure they could hear it, but I didn't let my hand shake. I pulled out a separate, crisp $20 bill. I held it for just a second. Then I slid it across the polished wood table. It glided over the surface and stopped right in front of her hand, right next to her wine glass. She stared at the bill. This is for you, Sheila, I said. My voice wasn't loud. It wasn't shaking. It was quiet, it was firm, and it was cold. Maybe you can buy yourself some manners. The silence that fell on the table was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop. The happy chatter from the table next to us suddenly seemed a million miles away. Dennis's mouth was literally hanging open. Mom, he whispered, his voice full of shock. And Sheila. Oh, Sheila. For the first time since I've known her, her perfect, powdered mask cracked. Her face, which was always so pale and controlled, turned a splotchy, ugly red. She didn't look sophisticated. She looked stunned, like she'd been slapped. I didn't wait for her to find her words. I didn't wait for Dennis to get his bearings. I turned to my grandchildren. They were just staring at me, their eyes as wide as saucers. I gave them a small, reassuring smile. Ethan, Lily, get your jackets. We're going home. They didn't ask a single question. They just scrambled out of the booth. I helped Lily with her little pink coat, my hands moving with purpose. I grabbed my purse, and without looking back at my son or his wife, I put one hand on Ethan's shoulder and took Lily's hand in mine. I felt a surge of not just anger. It was power. It was the feeling of a bone that had been broken for years finally snapping back into place. As we walked away, I could feel every eye in that section of the restaurant on us. But I didn't care. I walked straight past the front desk, pushed open the heavy glass door, and stepped out into the cool night air. My grandchildren's dignity came first, and I had just proven it. As soon as the heavy restaurant door clicked shut behind us, I let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for 10 years. The parking lot was quiet, just the hum of the streetlights and the distant sound of traffic. My heart was still racing, but that hot, sick feeling of humiliation was gone. In its place was this strange, electric calm. I clicked the unlock button on my car, and the kids piled into the back seat. They were completely silent. They just buckled themselves in, their faces serious in the dim light. I got in, put the key in the ignition, and just sat there for a second. The car was quiet. I turned around in my seat to look at them. Lily was clutching her little stuffed dog, and Ethan was just staring at the back of my headrest. "Hey," I said, my voice softer now. "You two okay?" Ethan nodded, but his eyes were still big. "Are you in trouble, Grandma?" he whispered. That just about broke my heart. "Oh, honey, no," I said. "I'm not in trouble. And you're not in trouble. You did absolutely nothing wrong." I reached back and put my hand on Lily's knee. "I want you both to listen to me very carefully. You don't ever have to feel second best. No one gets to treat you like you don't matter. Not ever. You understand?" They both nodded again, their eyes fixed on mine. "Good," I said, trying to give them a smile. "Now, who's really hungry?" A few minutes later, the car was filled with the smell of French fries and the sound of them quietly munching. We'd gone through the McDonald's drive-thru, and I'd never been so happy to buy 2 Happy Meals in my life. But as we drove through the quiet streets of Naperville, with the kids finally relaxing in the back, the adrenaline started to wear off, and the doubt started to creep in. My mind kept replaying that moment. Sheila's face, that look of pure, ugly shock. Dennis's voice, a sharp, disbelieving, "Mom." Oh, goodness. What had I done? I'd just caused a scene. I'd walked out on my son in public. I'd embarrassed him. I could just picture all the other diners staring, whispering. And the $20. My stomach did a tight little knot. Was that too much? Did I really have to say that? Buy yourself some manners. It was cruel. I knew it was cruel. I've always tried to be the better person, to be polite, to be the peacemaker. But what I did back there, that wasn't polite. It was petty. It was a low blow. I'd stooped right down to her level, hadn't I? I'd insulted her just as badly as she'd insulted me. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white. Maybe I should have just left. Just paid my share and taken the kids without a word. That would have been the classy thing to do, right? The high road. I thought about it. I really did. But then I thought about all the other times I'd taken the high road. All the Christmases I'd bitten my tongue. All the birthdays I'd let slide. All the little budget comments I'd ignored. And what did that high road get me? It got me a daughter-in-law who thought she could humiliate my grandchildren in public, and I would just take it. It got me 2 sweet kids who were learning that their feelings didn't matter. No, Sheila's behavior wasn't just a slip of the tongue. It was a pattern. It was an ongoing problem, and she was an ongoing bully. And you can't stop a bully by just quietly walking away. You can't break a cycle by keeping the peace. You have to make them understand that the rules have changed. Was the $20 comment petty? Yes, it absolutely was. And a part of me wasn't proud of it. But it was also the only language she would ever understand. It was the only way to make her feel, for just 1 second, a fraction of the humiliation she'd been dishing out to my family for years. as I pulled into my driveway and turned off the car. I looked in the rearview mirror. Ethan and Lily had both fallen asleep, their faces relaxed, their bellies full. I felt at peace. It wasn't the giddy, angry rush from the restaurant. It was a deep, solid, quiet peace. I knew I'd done the right thing, and I knew, just as certainly, that this was far from over. I got the kids back to my daughter Sandra's house late last night. I just tucked them in, said they'd had a long night, and told Sandra I'd call her in the morning. I was too tired and too wired to relive it all just then. I slept, but it was a thin, restless sleep. I was just making my morning coffee, staring out the kitchen window at the empty bird feeder, when my phone rang. It was just after 9. I didn't even have to look at the screen. I knew. I picked it up and said, "Hello, Dennis." "Mom, what was that?" It wasn't a question. It was just a flat, angry statement. I took a sip of my coffee. It was hot, and it steadied me. "Good morning to you, too," I said. "Don't, Mom. Just don't. She's beside herself. She didn't sleep all night. You completely embarrassed her." I sat down at my kitchen table, and his voice was suddenly loud, squeaking with disbelief. "Mom, you embarrassed me. You embarrassed our family. In front of her kids. In front of the whole restaurant." Then he got to the real point. Giving her $20? Giving her money like that? What were you thinking? You stooped right to her level. You were just as cruel as you think she was. There it was. The accusation. That I was the one in the wrong. That I was the one who had broken the peace. I let him finish. I let the silence hang there for a second. "Dennis," I said, and my voice was as calm and even as I've ever heard it. "I'm going to stop you right there." I didn't stoop. I stood up. "Mom, No, you listen." I cut him off, and this time there was steel in my voice. "I have sat quietly for 10 years. I have watched your wife treat my other grandchildren like they are something she scraped off her shoe. I have watched her buy them cheap toys while she gives her own children a mountain of gifts. I have listened to her forget their birthdays. And last night, I had to sit there while she made snide comments about my budget. I took a breath. And then she looked at 2 hungry children, your nephew and your niece, and told them they could eat when they get home. While her own children were already eating. She was just stressed, Mom." Dennis stammered. "You know how she gets. I'm done with her excuses. Dennis," I said, "and frankly, I'm disappointed in yours. Ethan and Lily are your nephew and niece. They are your sister's children. And you sat there scrolling on your phone and let her humiliate them. You let her make them feel small and worthless." I didn't. He started, but he had no answer. "I will not allow them to be treated as less than in my presence," I said. "Not one more time. The $20 wasn't an insult, Dennis. She spent the entire dinner humiliating your sister's children and making comments about my budget. I simply gave her a tip for the lesson she was giving us." He was quiet. The angry wind was gone from his sails, and now he just sounded lost. She's furious, Mom," he said, his voice smaller now. "She says she's never been so insulted in her life." "Well," I said, taking another sip of coffee. "Now she knows how it feels." Another long, heavy silence. I could hear him breathing on the other end. He was stuck. I knew he was. Stuck between his wife's anger and, somewhere deep down, the truth of what I was saying. I have to go," he finally said. "I have a meeting." "All right, Dennis," I said. I'll talk to you later." He hung up. He didn't understand. Not fully. He was still trying to protect his wife. But I planted a seed. He wasn't just defending her anymore. He was wavering. And for the first time, He was being forced to think. After that phone call with Dennis, a deep, heavy quiet settled over our family. I didn't hear from him for the rest of the week. Not a text, not another call. And from Sheila? Of course not. I was expecting that. The first thing I did after my coffee was gone was call my daughter, Sandra, and I told her everything. I didn't sugarcoat it. I told her what Sheila said to Ethan and Lily. I told her about the $20 bill and the look on Sheila's face. And I told her about the phone call with Dennis and how he'd accused me of stooping to her level. Sandra was quiet on the other end for a long time. I could hear her just breathing. Finally, she just said, "Oh, Mom." Her voice was thick. "Thank you. Just thank you." That was all I needed to hear. The next few weeks were different. The old, fake politeness was gone. The peace I had tried so hard to keep for all those years, it was gone, and I found I didn't miss it. In its place was a cold, quiet tension. You could feel it in the air. The first test came about 2 weeks after the restaurant. It was Ethan's Saturday morning soccer game. I always go, and so does Sandra. I pulled into the gravel parking lot, and my stomach did a little flip. Dennis's big, black SUV was parked near the entrance. They were there. Dennis, Sheila, and their 2 children standing on the sidelines, holding coffee cups. My first instinct, the old me, was to feel a rush of anxiety, to think, "Oh goodness, what do I do? Do I go over? Do I pretend I don't see them?" But the new me just parked the car, grabbed my folding chair, and walked right over to where Sandra was already saving me a spot. "Hello, Dennis." "Hello, Sheila," I said, my voice pleasant and calm. Dennis looked like a deer in the headlights. "Hey, Mom." He gave me a tight, pained little nod, and then quickly looked away, pretending to be fascinated by the game. Sheila had her big, dark sunglasses on, so I couldn't see her eyes. She didn't say hello. She just gave me the tiniest dip of her chin. Acknowledgement, nothing more. And that was fine. I sat down next to Sandra, and we watched the game. We cheered for Ethan. The air around our little family group was so cold you could have chipped it with an ice pick. Then something happened. Ethan got control of the ball and made a really good run down the field. I jumped up, clapping and yelling, "Go, Ethan, go." And I heard, from just a few feet away, Sheila's voice. It was very quiet. "He's gotten better this season." I didn't turn around. I didn't say, "Oh, yes, hasn't he?" I just sat back down. A few minutes later, she walked over. She stood just behind my chair. "Jessica." I turned my head. "Sheila." "Ethan's science fair project," she said. Her voice was flat, like she was asking a coworker for a file. "Is that next week?" My son has his on the same day. The old me would have burst into a smile. I would have gushed. "Oh, yes, it is. That's wonderful. We should all go." I would have seen this as an olive branch, a sign that she wanted to make up, and I would have done all the emotional work to mend the fence. But I just looked at her. I wasn't rude. I wasn't cold. I was just neutral. "Yes, it is," I said. "It's on Thursday." And then I turned back to the field. I didn't ask about her son's project. I didn't try to make small talk. I had answered her question. That was all. I could feel her standing there for a second, maybe expecting more. But I didn't give it. That was the new boundary. The tension between me and Sheila is deeper now, but it's honest. I prefer this. I prefer this cold honesty to the fake, sugary poison she was serving before. My relationship with Dennis is strained. He calls me, but only when he's alone, usually driving home from work. We talk about the weather. We talk about his job. He doesn't mention Sheila. I don't mention her. We are both carefully, awkwardly walking around the giant hole in the middle of our family. It's sad. He's my son, and I love him. But he's going to have to be the one to decide to fix it, because I've changed. I'm not the quiet, submissive mother-in-law they all knew. I'm not the peacemaker. I'm the advocate. I'm the one who watches. I'm the one who will speak up. And Ethan and Lily, they know it. I see them more than ever. And when I'm with them, they seem lighter. They laugh more. They know Grandma is in their corner. I'm no longer the silent accomplice, and I will never be her again. It was a Tuesday afternoon, about a month after the soccer game. A month of silence from Sheila and strained, superficial calls from Dennis. I was in the kitchen, wiping down the counters when my phone rang. I glanced at the screen, and my hand just stopped. It said Sheila. My heart didn't race this time. I just felt tired. I took a breath, dried my hands on my apron, and answered it. Hello, Sheila. Jessica. Her voice was small, not her usual crisp, confident tone. It was thin. Dude, you have a minute? Can we talk? I looked at my clean counter. I'm listening. There was a long pause. I could hear her take a shaky breath on the other end. This was costing her something. I want to, she started and then stopped. Dennis says, no, that's not right. Another breath. That night, at the restaurant, I was wrong. I waited. I didn't say it's okay. I didn't say thank you. I didn't say anything to make it easier for her. I just waited. She had to be the one to do this. The things I said about the kids, about them eating at home, it was... Her voice cracked just a little. It was cruel. I know it was. And I'm sorry. She said it. The words were finally out. I'm sorry. I sat down at my kitchen table. Why, Sheila? I asked. It wasn't an accusation. I genuinely wanted to know. Why have you always been like that? With them? This was the silence that lasted the longest. I could hear a clock ticking in her house. I was about to ask if she was still there when she finally spoke. It's not about them, she said, so quietly I almost couldn't hear her. They're good kids. I know they are. I've always known. Then who is it about? I asked. It's Sandra. I leaned back in my chair. I can't say I was completely shocked, but to hear her admit it. What about Sandra? She's always been so... Sheila was struggling, trying to find the words. You and her, you're so easy with each other. She's your daughter. And she's so capable. She's a nurse. She saves people. She's beautiful. And she doesn't even have to try. And she's doing it all on her own. Her voice trailed off. And I finally understood. All the high-end clothes, the expensive restaurants, the perfect nails, it was all armor. And I'm just the one who married your son, she whispered. I'm just the one with the money. I know you all see it. I know she sees it. I always felt like, next to her, I was nothing, just tacky. And when I saw her kids, you saw her, I finished for her. And you took it out on them. Yes, she said. It was barely a breath. I was jealous. Just this deep, ugly jealousy. And I was taking it out on two little kids. And then when you put that money on the table, her voice broke. You proved it. You proved what I always thought. That you all just saw me as this rude, rich person with no manners. You saw exactly what I was. I closed my eyes. This wasn't a victory. This felt profoundly sad. Here was this woman who had everything I was supposed to be jealous of, and she was crippled by insecurity. Sheila, I said, and my voice was softer now. I appreciate your apology. I really do. It takes a lot to say what you just said. I want things to be better, she said, sniffling. But this is about more than just that night, I continued. And my voice was firm again. This can't be fixed with one phone call. This is about how we treat each other as a family every single day. This is about Ethan and Lily. They don't deserve to be casualties in your, or my, or anyone's personal battles. They're just children. I know, she said. I know. I promise. I want to be more mindful. I will be more mindful. I don't want this Cold War anymore. I don't want it either. Sheila, I said, but forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means we start from a new place. An honest one. Okay, she said. Okay, honest. When we hung up the phone, I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel like I'd won. I just felt a little lighter. It was the first honest conversation we'd had in 10 years. And it was a start. That phone call, it didn't magically fix everything. It wasn't like a movie where we suddenly hugged and became the best of friends. Life isn't like that. But it was a start. It was the first honest, real, uncomfortable conversation we had ever had. The real test, I knew, would be Thanksgiving. I decided to host this year. I didn't ask. I just told everyone. Thanksgiving is at my house, 2 p.m. Let me know what you're bringing. I wasn't going to her turf, and I knew Sandra and the kids would be more comfortable at my place. When Dennis and Sheila walked in, the air was still fragile. You could feel it. But Sheila wasn't wearing her usual armor. She didn't have that stiff, perfect look. Her hair was just in a simple ponytail. She looked tired. She handed me a pie. A real, store-bought pumpkin pie in a tinfoil pan. Not some $500 creation from a French bakery. Thank you, Sheila, I said. It smells lovely. Can you give me a hand in the kitchen? Dennis looked at me, surprised. But Sheila just nodded. Sure. We stood side by side at the counter, washing lettuce for a salad. We didn't talk about the incident. We talked about the weather. We talked about how long the turkey was taking. It was normal. It was stilted and awkward, but it was normal. The real change, though, I saw at the dinner table. It was a full house. All the kids were squeezed in. I made sure Ethan and Lily sat right next to me at the head of the table. We were all passing the dishes. Sheila's son, who was a year older than Ethan, reached for the sweet potatoes. At the exact same time, Lily reached for them. Their hands bumped. It was a tiny, split-second moment. But I saw it. I saw Sheila open her mouth. I saw that old, sharp instinct flash in her eyes, that instinct to protect her kid, to claim the dish for her side. And I just looked at her. From my end of the table, I met her gaze. I didn't glare. I didn't smile. I just held her gaze. I didn't let go. She paused. The whole table was quiet. Then she looked at her son. Sweetheart, she said, her voice quiet but clear. Let your cousin Lily go first. She's right there. He pulled his hand back. Okay. Lily took the spoon, served herself, and passed the bowl. It was nothing. It was a 2-second moment that no one else at the table even noticed. But I noticed, and across the table, I saw my daughter Sandra's eyes. She was looking right at me, and she gave me the smallest, most grateful smile I have ever seen. That's the new beginning. My relationship with Sheila is not perfect. I don't think we'll ever be the kind of friends who go shopping together. But we don't have to be. That cold, biting tension is gone. In its place is an understanding, an honest one. We are two women who now know exactly where the other's boundaries are. And my relationship with Dennis is healing. He's trying. He calls me more. He asks about Sandra. He asks about Ethan and Lily. He's making an effort. But the biggest change really is in me. I feel solid. I don't walk into a room with my family anymore bracing for a hit. I don't feel that dread. I feel empowered. I feel like I finally, at 67 years old, found my own voice, and I'm not afraid to use it. I took a stand. I drew a line. And the world didn't end. My family bent, but it didn't break. In fact, it's being rebuilt on something stronger now. Something honest. I look at Ethan and Lily. They're just kids. They're not less than. They're not Sandra's kids in that other category. They're just my grandchildren, same as the others. That's all I ever wanted. As I was washing the dishes that night, after everyone had gone home, I just stood there at the sink, my hands in the warm, soapy water. And I thought, sometimes you have to be the one to make things right. Not for anyone else, but for yourself and for the ones you love. No one should ever feel less than. My story has its new beginning, but I know for so many of you, this is still your everyday life. That feeling of being invisible or watching someone you love be treated as less than is one of those silent battles we fight all the time. And that's why I wanted to share this. I want to hear your story. The comments section here, it's a community. It's a place where we can talk about the things that really matter. So I have to ask, what would you have done in my shoes? Do you think I went too far with that $20 comment? Was it justified? Or did I just stoop to her level? Have you ever had to stand up for your family, even if it meant making waves? And have you ever experienced favoritism in your own family? How did it affect you? Please let me know in the comments below. Your story and your wisdom are so important. And if my story touched you or reminded you of someone, please give this video a like. It's such a simple click, but it tells the people who run this platform that these stories are important. It helps share this with more people who might need to hear that they're not alone. And of course, if you want to hear more stories like this one, please be sure to subscribe to the channel. We have a lot more to talk about. Lastly, remember to download this wonderful book called Coming Back to Myself, 60 Liberating Truths to Find Yourself Again. You'll find it in the pinned comment below. Now, if you like this story, go ahead and click on the next video appearing on your screen, because in it is a story of betrayal and revolt like you've never seen before on her Kindle Stories. Thank you for listening.